Carving the Show. I'm Sue Robinson.
And I'm Vanessa Alava, and we're here with Miss Alisa Walters, our uh, recruiter, talent specialist extraordinaire.
Absolutely. We're excited to talk to Alisa today because the topic we're going to cover is a difficult one, but a really timely and important one. And that is the bro culture in the workplace. If you are a woman in the working world, you've probably encountered some measure of this, hopefully a mild one in most cases, um, of a culture that is male dominated and not very sensitive to what it's like to be a woman in that setting, in that professional environment. And this couldn't be more timely because of what's coming out in the news now regarding Blizzard and Activision and some of the egregious alleged um, misbehavior on within that organization. So, Alisa, practically speaking, for the rest of us, how do we navigate a workplace that has a strong bro culture?
Well, completely timely. And I think that backing up a minute to just define what bro culture is, right? And in some of the articles that I was reading as I was preparing for this conversation, I think that an organization, Breathe, they're an HR platform, online platform. They define it as a young, brash, hyper competitive workplace with let me rephrase that. They define it as young, brash, hyper competitive men with obnoxious and toxic behavior. It's common in industries that are most underrepresented by women. And it's also, the ego, the prestige, the entitlement that men, um, privileged men, seem to flock to.
Yes.
So I found it interesting. Another article that I was reading was on In Her Site, and there was a report that was done by women in tech that said that 72% of women in the tech industry reported having worked at a company where bro culture was very prevalent and pervasive. And in that same report, the conversations that they had with men, only 41% of men indicated any discrepancy. And that could be due to a difference in their perception. It's hard to recognize that problems when you're not the one being negatively affected and impacted by it, or you're in a position of power where you're perpetuating this behavior. And in bro culture, the reward, if you will, is this excessive partying, excessive spending, excessive, just obnoxious behavior. So I think it is a tale as old as time, and it's bad for business, and it's bad for morale, and it's trying to change that. And I know that, um, as the Me Too movement a couple of years back really became prevalent, I think we are starting to see more conversations around this. But I think it's important to recognize how this starts to happen in the first place. And it starts with, we see it a lot in tech and with a lot of startups in Silicon Valley. And I think it's because when you have this certain type of personality trait, starting a startup, and it's, starts out with this one-man band, HR is not the first thing in somebody's mind when they're trying to get something off the ground. And that is something that tends to go by the wayside. So it needs to be looked at when somebody who is starting a business, there needs to be more of an incentive to have that awareness about what kind of leadership needs to be in place, what kind of HR needs to be in place. Because recruiting off the bat, if recruitment doesn't start from the very beginning to bring in people that are going to bring in a positive work culture, it's only going to continue to perpetuate this cycle.
I completely agree. And this is a huge issue to unpack here. The biggest thing in my brain, Alisa, when you started talking or defining what bro culture is, when you said that like 40% ish of men don't realize when they're doing this thing. It reminded me of, I'm going to go back. Sue and I were just having a conversation about the morning show. And if you haven't caught that show on Apple Plus with Jennifer Aniston, Reese Witherspoon, Steve Carell, like stellar cast, you should. And it addresses a lot of these things and bro culture. But there's a, and I guess this is a spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, but there is this pivotal moment, couple moments in the show where Steve Carell's character is speaking to another bro about the Me Too movement and how they're so unfairly portrayed and all of these things. And he's talking to this one guy who is speaking about his different experiences with women. And Steve Carell's character has just been accused of something very, very big and been fired from, his position. But as this person is speaking to him, he's realizing, oh wow, he's a predator. Like he's done all of these things that I would never do. But later in the show, there's like this pivotal moment where he has like this aha, like, oh my God, I've done similar things and I never saw myself in that light. So he therefore sees that he's been a predator. And there's this big revelation. But this happens all the time. To your point, there are more open conversations, more vulnerable conversations being had. Something else you mentioned that I think is huge here is HR and the way they approach the situation, because I feel there's a very fine line between being, it's a serious matter, but if you make it intimidating for someone to come in and it become like an investigation from the start, that dissuades people from coming forward because they don't want to make it a huge issue. You need to have someone in HR that's going to have a conversation that is, um, you know, compassionate and not approaching it like an interview with Barbara Walters, and
Right.
something that's going to go beyond that room at the start. And if it needs to go that route, then so be it. But I think initially when you're having that conversation, it needs to come from a place of, this is a safe place. This isn't going anywhere. Let's have an open dialogue as to what you're feeling.
And nip it in the bud, right? Like you don't
Yeah.
want to wait till it's a big deal. And I think it's super important that organizations make it very clear that if you're uncomfortable for any reason, let's talk about that in the beginning and not wait until it becomes a legal, it becomes a lawsuit or a huge issue. I think that's probably really salient and sage advice for organizations. What are your thoughts, Alisa?
I agree. And I think that it also, we do have to look at, this is an organizational hierarchy that has existed for decades. And it's something that we really need to be mindful of. And I know that there are a lot of organizations out there that are really trying to bring this front and center as startups are coming. If somebody's looking to create a startup, making this a part of that process of going into business and starting a business, and leaders really need to be aware, not just the person who's trying to get this off the ground, which I mean, the lack of self-awareness is why we get into some of that bro culture, that behavior, because people aren't self-aware of their behavior. But people who are investing in these startups, anybody who is stamping their name on these businesses, and it's not just small, it's not just startups, it's behemoth companies too. I mean, we've heard about the big names in Silicon Valley that have had accusations against them, and it is a conversation that needs to be prevalent in every organization. And I do think that it really, when a company also has an opportunity to grow so fast, and HR and having a mission and a value system behind your business, that's when bad seeds can grow. And I'm using my air quotes, bad seeds can quickly grow, because I thought that was a really great way that the author of this article that I was reading had really approached it. And I think that there's so much conversation that's happening, but I think, Vanessa, you brought up having those conversations with HR. It is something that has to be a conversation. A safe space has to be created. You as a person want to feel like you're being protected and listened to, and that they are going to advocate for you. If you are going to come forward and be vulnerable and talk about any kind of harassment or discrimination or any of this toxic behavior you may be feeling and experiencing at your job on a day-to-day basis, you need to feel like you do have an ally who's going to listen and advocate for you within the company.
100%. And to that point, I just want to add, and I want to take a beat for anybody listening or watching us right now. There are mostly, I believe, good guys out there in companies. And I know that many of my allies and friends and people I've learned from and who've supported me throughout my career have been on the good team and they've been male, and I've certainly experienced my share of sexism too, but it's usually not a culture thing, at least in TV news, it kind of was, but since then it really hasn't been. So my plea is to all the men out there who might be listening to this, who do respect women and do like to have empowered and equal colleagues in the workplace who are contributing to the team and working shoulder to shoulder towards a goal. Be an ally, be an advocate, and speak up if you see something, because I do think a lot of this culture change has to come from within the community that the few small bad apples perpetrate it, right? And that's the community of men out there. So thank you to all the great men who are out there who get it, and please speak up and continue to advocate for your female colleagues.
I'm so happy you brought that up. So you and I were on the same page, because that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, can we please dive into men that are inadvertently in this bro culture that don't agree with what's happening? And hey, I know on the opposite end, being a female, like in a room where you are the only person standing up for something or raising your hand to speak out, it's scary and it's not the popular vote, right? And you're going to feel isolated and you're going to get the weird looks, especially if the other people in the room don't agree or have a different perspective. But please know that that's so valued by your female colleagues. It's the right thing to do. If you are feeling it, you know it's the right thing to do in your gut. And no matter what those people say, in the long run, those people will have their day. They're going to get caught one way or the other, whether it's today, tomorrow, it's going to happen. But you can be on the positive end of that change and really try to kind of shift that compass within that organization as much as possible. And if you see that you can't, then again, is it the organization you really want to be part of?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, both great call outs. I think that it's important to recognize that we're not on here saying that all men are bad
No.
and that are perpetuating a bro culture. And I think it does start with, if you are in an organization and you are, the mission behind the organization, the leadership is good, but perhaps it is starting to feel like it is becoming more of a bro culture, then maybe as a male employee, you may start inviting more of your female employees and sending their names to recruiters, to hiring managers, to help bring in that parity, and reaching the parity in the workplace, to displace bro culture. And I think that's one way that men can advocate for women in this sense, and not just women, but also people who are underrepresented in general. And I think it's having those conversations to bring in to have those effective hiring practices from the start within companies as well, because it all does start with the hiring. So it's important that you are looking at diversity, inclusion from the start, so that you're not trying to figure out how you landed in this situation where you're in a bro culture, toxic work environment. So it starts from the beginning. It starts with good hiring. It starts with making HR a priority, and having open, honest conversations.
Well, it's self-reflection too, right? With the company, whether whoever is at the top, it's like really reflecting on, do we have an issue? What can we do to fix those issues? Have I been contributing to this unintentionally? What have I done in the past, what can I do to fix it? And there's always that opportunity to fix it, to do the right thing. And I think that's what we're saying here.
And ask your female colleagues, or if you're,
Yeah.
or just ask your minority, the people in your office who don't look like everybody else. Have that conversation and just say, how do you feel here? Do you feel, just check in with them. Just the human to human connection is just checking in with folks to see how they feel and what their experience is like. I don't think that ever hurts ever, because it just gives us all a better understanding of the landscape that we're operating in. So ask the question.
I'd also love, Alisa, your insights and advice on someone who might be in the position of experiencing the negative pieces of bro culture, which I feel like bro culture in general is negative and toxic. But if you're in that situation where you're in an industry that you really love, you want to make an impression, and let's say whether you've been there for a while or whether you're new, what are the best ways to approach situations that you might be put in that make you feel uncomfortable and that are wrong?
I think it's really going to be a person by person basis. I think that, it kind of goes along with what we've talked about with effective communication, right? Because in these situations, you are going to be communicating with somebody who might be more aggressive and may not be, it may be hard to have that conversation. So I would start with, okay, self reflection of what's going on. And if there's somebody immediately that you can have conflict resolution with, hey, I'm noticing that these are things that are happening, and I'm wondering, it makes me feel uncomfortable. It makes me feel like I'm being overlooked for certain things, or whatever it is, however it's impacting you, and see if you can have those conversations where you feel like there might be, because that person may not be aware of what's happening. And then if you're feeling like you're not getting anywhere with maybe your manager or this person directly, then maybe you need to elevate it and have those conversations with your HR manager, and make documentation of things that are happening. Keep a log of those things so you can go to, when you are ready to have that conversation, if you do escalate it to HR, and say, this is what's going on and this is how it's impacting me, and come this with the facts, and state how it's impacting your ability to do your job, to show up every day to do your job. And I think, with us all having worked from home, it may feel like you're kind of on an island of yourself, by yourself. But I think it's really important that you still know that you do have channels that you can tune into to try to help you work through some of these things. And then if you're feeling like you're not getting anywhere with HR, who's in place to support employees, then that's a much bigger conversation that needs to happen.
For sure. And I love that you said document it. As you were talking about, first have the conversation with the person who's the problem. I think that's fair. And I think that is always the right place to start. Unfortunately, when the bro culture is egregious, that person probably isn't, if they thought they were doing something wrong, they probably wouldn't be doing it in the workplace. So you have that sort of built-in barrier. But yes, be specific, I think would be my advice. Be very specific about what happened, what the incident or the words were used, and document it in email so that you do have a track record, and then keep the emotion out of it, which is so hard to do when you feel like in any situation where you're being treated unfairly or disrespected. But I think you will go a lot farther if you stay calm, factual, and are very specific about what it is you want to see changed, why, and write it down.
Gosh, you are so right, Sue, with that being hard, because
Mhm.
I'm the first one that like my emotions take over me, especially if I'm really passionate about something. Like it's almost something I can't help. So I think that preparing, we always talk about preparing and almost rehearsing what you want to say and how you want it to land, and getting the perspectives of your tribe, right? Like, your family, the people that support you, mentors, and just say, hey, do you mind helping me grapple with this and present myself in a way that's going to be effective and get somewhere versus just closing the door right there, because that's not going to help anything.
Mhm.
And I think that I love the idea of connecting with your own personal support when you're going into these conversations. I think, especially if you work for a large company that may have some other resources that you can tap into. There are companies that provide different types of therapy. I know there's a lot of those apps now that are I can't think of any of the names, but that are specifically virtual therapists that you can tune into. And that's something that a lot of companies are offering. Maybe you feel like you can utilize one of the resources that a company is offering to also get some perspective. And then companies are required to offer sexual harassment training. I mean, as an employee, you may have had to take a sexual harassment training, and maybe you want to refer back to one of those courses that you've taken. Those courses offer some robust information as well, that of where to go and where to start those conversations if you're just not sure.
All great advice. Any other thoughts?
I think
For me, I think it's just, it's hard being that squeaky wheel, and it's hard being in a situation where, I think especially if you're new and green, where you're trying to get experience and you're trying to thrive in a specific industry that's underrepresented and that's experiencing this across the board, not so much by company, but it's just an industry thing. It's really hard. And I think that keeping your focus and your passion centered, as far as like, this is where I want to go and I want to be part of this change. And almost, I think for me, when I've been in those situations, especially in film and TV and entertainment, where it's bro culture has been alive and well for way too many years, it's almost putting aside what people are going to think of me, and almost feeling like, you know what, the ones that matter are going to respect me for this, versus what the ones that aren't going to matter, especially like people that I don't want to have long-term relationships with because they're not going to get it. Like, almost like saying, I don't care what they think. I'm going to do the right thing, and I'm going to speak up, not only for myself but for other people when I see it, because it's the right thing to do. And just keeping that as your main focus, because there will be a job after that one, and a job after that one, and an opportunity after that one. This is not the only opportunity you're ever going to have.
100%. And I was also going to add, be prepared to walk away. And that's really hard to hear.
Yes.
But the truth is that the reason bro culture, when it's so problematic that it's just, it's escalated, that's in some ways been sanctioned from the top down. Then there's a power dynamic there. And I'm thinking of, again, young women that I know who are right out of college, who are trying to fight a bro culture that starts with the person who owns the company, or somebody so high up the food chain that at that point you have to make that difficult decision. It's not fair. It's not fair that the victim should have to be the one who goes and hunts for another job, because it's just so intolerable. But life is real, and that's how it rolls. So I think, get your ducks in a row if you're at that point. Again, document everything, and then you give yourself permission to move on. And you may have to do the hard work of, and again, unfair that you have to do the hard work of finding another job where you might really enjoy the actual work, but you're not getting a chance to do it in your current organization because of the way you're being treated. I think at that point, you just have to have faith in yourself that, you'll find that somewhere else, and you'll get tougher and stronger as a result of the experience, but get out of the toxic environment.
I love that, Sue.
Yeah.
That's so true. And also, going back to the support piece of this, Alisa, mentorship is so important. Reach out to mentors that look like you and that can give you like their side, and if they've experienced it, which I'm sure they have, but they can give you advice and advocate for you, and be a support and backbone to you when you need it most, because that's how we all continue moving forward. Without that, it makes it 10 times harder in a very difficult space to begin with.
You already feel isolated. And I would also add, we talked a few weeks ago about those questions to ask when you're interviewing to dig deeper. And this is one another reason why, if you're interviewing for a company with a company, you need to interview the company too. You need to learn about how the team is managed, and how a manager, get a sense of how that manager is advocating for their team, get a sense of who else is working on the team and what kind of projects and things. You'll learn a lot about in those conversations. And while you may not be able to solve every issue within an organization that you're currently in, you can be an advocate for yourself and say, this is one I'm absolutely not going to be a part of. To Sue's point, it's and the reality is it does exist, and you don't have to be a part of it, and you have to be ready to walk away when it's not serving you. It's not worth your mental health, and it's not worth your life.
Be part of the greater change. That's all in general. Well, thank you, Alisa.
Thank
This
you.
has been great.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to stop this. For
The
sake of
recording has
time,
stopped.
I would say, Sue, let's hold off on the next recording. But
Yes.
I love this episode. I mean, Alisa, you and I, not to mention any type of names because we're not going to go down that road, but oh my gosh, like I'm feeling this one so hard just because I feel like, and Sue, you too, you've always advocated for the little guy.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I have literally, like, whether it be me or other people, like and not to stick my nose in other people's business, but I'm like, I have to stand up. Yeah, I have to stand up for that person, because that could be me next, or that could be somebody else next that looks like me, and I'm not having it. And now, especially the mom of a daughter, forget it. Like, it's that much more, and there's zero tolerance. Zero.
Yeah,
I agree 100%. And it is unfair, because at the end of the day, so often it's the person who's being treated unfairly, who just isn't going to be able to. It's like trying to change the culture. It's like trying to roll that boulder up a hill. It's just not going to work. But then that organization isn't worth, to your point, Alisa, your mental health. You're probably not going to advance there because they don't respect you. Right. And you're going to feel worse about it. But it's going to eat away at you.
Yes.
Over time. And it's not worth it. But
no.
But speak up while you're there. And it's so hard, but it's exhausting. And I have been in organizations where I have spoken up and fought it, and then finally said, you know what? I'm out.
Yeah.
Nothing's changing here except I'm getting tired. So,
no, exactly.
Anyway.
Yeah. All I kept hearing in my head as I've been reading this is when I accepted a job when I was working in entertainment, and everyone just kept saying to me, it's a bro culture. It's a bro club. You're going to the boys club. And I was like, I got this. And boy, I think that was really I had experienced it, but I was on different projects, and I would be on, I'd be on different projects that would have an end date, and I'd be moving on to the next one. And, a couple of positions that were more every day for the long haul. It's just like, this is not okay. This is not acceptable behavior.
Yeah. Well, and go ahead, Sue.
Well, I was just gonna say, a lot of times people don't want to change.
No.
And if they don't want to change, and if they don't see a problem with what they're doing, then you're just wasting your time and energy.
Well, I feel like it also just, at least in my experience, Alisa, I know that you and I work specifically for the same organization that we're thinking of, but to me, it hurt because when I first started in that environment, I didn't quite see it immediately. It was something that grew. Like I saw one thing here and then another thing there, and then it became this monster. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it hurt because of management, of leadership. I looked up to them, and I was like, trying to get experience in the industry and really taking notes and, seeing what they were doing and not doing. And when all of those things started to add up in my head, and I was like, oh my gosh, am I the only one seeing this? Clearly I wasn't, but in my head, of course, I'm green. I'm like, is this normal? it just it crushed me. Like it crushed me because I looked up to those people so much, and they either, and I'm a benefit of the doubt person. Like I'm like, do they not see it? Are they doing this without realizing it? But when it's somewhat blatant, it's hard to continue giving those people or that person the benefit of the doubt, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're clearly just that person.
Yeah.
And my respect for you now is non-existent. So it's hard to come back from it. Really is hard to come back from that place. It's hard to come back from that place. So it's I'm
it's
appreciative.
hard, but it's part of life. Yeah. And you learn from it, right? And you learn to be more discerning. And it's just one of those hard knock lessons in life that we all go through.
And I am appreciative, like from that time, close to 10 years ago ish. There have been a lot more vulnerable conversations, openness. The Me Too movement has definitely helped with that. But I still know that there are eye rolls when people think of the Me Too movement, especially certain men. And I understand that not all men fit this box that we're talking about, right? The bro culture box. But there are still eye rolls. And it's like, it's a movement and a big deal because look at how many people has affected. And those are just the people that have spoken up.
Yeah.
And then when you have these cases that have gone to court, and then the outcome has been that the predator or the whomever, the harasser, doesn't get reprimanded, like that is another layer of like, well, there's still a ton of work to be done, right?
Yeah.
There is a ton of work to be done.
Absolutely.
So
and it's having these conversations that can help continue to make change.
And and just again, encouraging those ally males to just check in and to speak up and letting them know how much we appreciate them, because I think in those kinds of organizations, a male voice, wrongly, but a male voice just in general will be respected more than a female voice.
Well, it's what's being heard.
Yeah, exactly.
Mitchell, were you trying to? Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna briefly say that Kendall Army is back from last week.
Kendall, hi.
Hi, Kendall.
And she has a question and also a comment. I'll give you the comment first because I think you might like it. She said, "I checked the website. It's great. I felt like I should work there."
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're still in full transparency. We're still trying to like get our website to work the way we want it to. And that's been like a big reason why you haven't even seen the push on social media yet. But thank you, Kendall, because like we have worked so hard on that website and we are not website developers. So thank you. That means a lot.
Yes.
As far as the question, it's slightly off topic, not directly on bro culture, but actually if you actually like look at it a little closer, it definitely could still apply. Also introduced a new name for freshmen, because I'm used to calling it a freshman. Fresher. I actually had to look it up. Fresher for somebody who's a first year in college or university. I had never heard that before, and it makes way more sense because it, obvious reasons. So hi, I'm back again. My question is, as a fresher, it feels so hard for me to adapt to the atmosphere. So what if I recommend everyone being themselves rather than following a pattern to be simple? What I mean is respect to individuality.
Yeah. I think anytime you can encourage your peers to respect individuality and just to respect each other and stop and listen, you're improving the world around you. You're making a change in the world around you.
Agreed.
I would just say, I would say if everyone looked, felt, thought the same, we would live in a really boring world with zero innovation. So be you, because no one else is going to be you better than yourself. And all of your differences and unique thoughts and ideas and creativity, whatever that is only going to enhance whatever conversation you're part of, whatever group you decide to join in college, whatever company you decide to join after college. Thank goodness that we're all individual and we have all of these gifts that we can bring. And not to feel too, I don't know, when we hippie, if you will, right? Like it's not that, but at the end of the day, we live on a beautiful earth we are human beings, and I think as human beings innately we want to help each other out and we want to see the beauty in each other, but politics and greed and hate like just infiltrate that, and it's so ugly, and we just need to learn to like lift each other up no matter who we are, because at the end of the day we're all human beings. Like
Mhm.
Yeah.
Be confident, just be really confident, because people respect that. And it's hard sometimes, but once you start using your voice, you'll value it more. Other people will value you for it. And it's just like a snowball going down the hill. You'll get more and more confident as you go. And I would also say, reach out to those people around you who maybe are a little more quiet, a little more shy, and empower them, because you'll build your tribe. You'll find your tribe there, and you'll find people who so appreciate and value what you bring to the table. And those are the people that you want to align yourself with.
I'm kicking you out of my head, Sue.
Vanessa and I think very
I
similarly.
literally wrote tribe on my notepad here because, I think that it's like one of those cliche terms that people use now on social media. It's like, oh, find your tribe, da, da, da. It's out there because it's true. It's so hard to find your group of people, like your people. And I think you learn this the older and wiser you become, and the different experiences you've had as a child going through elementary school and high school and college. Very few people still keep in contact with people in high school, right? And like in college, you pick those core people that become your tribe, because it's hard, right? There's so many people out there, and a lot of them, unfortunately, they just go along with the crowd, right? And like they're scared to be themselves. But when you find people that are like-minded, aligned, that want to lift each other up, that are super okay with being in like their individual person, or have grown into being okay being their own individual person, there's power in that. And that becomes like, that's why it's called a tribe, because you have handpicked these people and said, yes, you are like me. Like we get it. Right?
Empower each
Yeah.
other.
Alisa, what do you have to say?
And I would say, and don't be afraid to walk away from people who aren't in line, who aren't. And I think when we're young, it's like you want to be friends with everybody. You want to have community, and then you start to find yourself, when you're with people that aren't aligned, that you start to maybe start feeling bad about yourself. And when you start to feel like you're in a community of people that don't understand you, don't respect you, and aren't aligned, then don't be afraid to end those relationships and walk away. And there doesn't have to be any big dramatic breakup. It could be slowly, coming from my film background, is there could be a slow fade to black, but continue to build yourself up with a community that is aligned with your values and what you're looking for. And those voices aren't all going to have the same opinion, but that's mutual respect.
Absolutely.
And empower yourself as well as others around you to use your voice and theirs.
I think that's huge, Alisa, to know when to walk away and that it's okay. You can outgrow people, because you know what, as an individual, if you're constantly one that's looking to become a better version of yourself, to grow, to consistently be learning, not everyone feels that way. And you might come to a point where you have outgrown that person, that group. Maybe you start to see that there's been a shift on that person, where they start saying things that you really don't agree with or align with. And it's not saying that you don't care for that person, because they were in your life for a reason during that season of your life. But it's okay to say, you know what, we had great times, and I'm just going to fade to black slowly, because I have outgrown you, and you're no longer serving. We're no longer serving each other's purposes the way we'd like to move on in our lives. Right. So I think that's huge.
I was once told that you have to think of yourself, right, as a train that keeps moving forward. And on your train of life, you're going to have people get on at stops and people get on off at stops. And sometimes there are going to be people that are going to be on that train ride with you for the long haul. And there's going to be people who get on for one stop and they get off at another stop, because there was a purpose. There was a reason for you having that connection at that time in your life. Because it could have taught you something about yourself. It was what you needed at the time, what they needed at the time. But it's okay if people get off the stop and don't get back on.
I love
It's
that
okay.
analogy. That's very cool. That's very cool.
I love it. And of course, Oprah Winfrey fan here, huge Oprah Winfrey fan. And she always talks about people that are sucking the energy out of you, or the light, like those vampires out there, because they exist. Remove yourself from those situations and those relationships. They are toxic and they will bring you down. And the minute that you make that conscious choice, you will be surprised as to what other opportunities open, what other amazing relationships come to fruition. I mean, it's a real thing. Like negative energy is a real thing. So don't let other people suck the life out of you. Okay. That light.
Absolutely. We're coming up on our hour here, and I know Vanessa and I have a call. Is there anything else, Mitch?
I
That
have one last question from a new viewer, Juniper Riddle.
Hi, Juniper Riddle.
Hi, Juniper.
Asking, are we the train or are we the conductor?
Ooh. The conductor.
Or are we
both? we can be both. It's our train that we are the conductor of.
Right. What Alisa said.
Yeah.
What Alisa said, for sure. I think that 100% we're a force, and we can make choices, informed choices, gut choices that make sense for us. So in that regard, we are the conductors of our own train.
Absolutely. Follow your own true north, and, do it all with respect. I mean, never look back with regret, right? As you can't control other people's behavior or how they treat you or how long you're in a relationship with them. But if you look back and you acted with integrity and to your own true north, then you'll be able to move on with peace. And that's important to have in life. So I think conductor, train, it's just an analogy, but yeah, we all get the idea. And I love the analogy. So thank you, everybody who's joined us today. Thank you, ladies, for this really great conversation. And thank you, Mitchell.
So good. Thank you, Alisa.
Thank you.
Thank you to our viewers on Twitch and for engaging with us. We really appreciate the support, and continue following us for great content every week.
Absolutely. Bye, guys.
Bye.